So this was breaking yesterday, right around the time the stream started. And I kind of wanted it to unfold a little bit more. I wanted to wait to hear from Glenn directly. And I'm pretty sure Glenn was speaking out about it pretty much as our stream was going on. Either that or he did it right before. And, I just missed it. I mean, what can I say? Like I combed the internet the best I could before the show started. It's just me and the cat. What are you going to do? But anyway, so we're talking about it today. And here's what's been going on. And there's a lot of valuable lessons here. All right, so let's do a kind of what's going on here first. Breaking: Glenn Greenwald charged with cyber crimes in Brazil. This hit the press yesterday. American journalist and author Glenn Greenwald was charged with engaging in cyber crimes in Brazil on Tuesday after being accused of hacking the phones of prosecutors. Because keep in mind, hacking is the actual crime. Publishing is not the actual crime. So if he's publishing stuff that was hacked, well, that's not a crime. But if you hack stuff illegally, well, that's technically a crime. That's part of the reason, that is the reason why Chelsea Manning is going through what she's going through. They really want to get a confession out of Chelsea Manning where she says that Julian Assange helped her hack things. She's not saying that, probably because it isn't true, but that's what they really want her to say. They really want her to say that so they can say Julian Assange hacked stuff. But anyway, all right, so that's what they're trying to accuse Glenn Greenwald of. According to the New York Times, Greenwald was charged for his role in the spreading of cell phone messages that have embarrassed prosecutors and tarnished the image of an anti-corruption task force. Prosecutors also reportedly accused Greenwald of working with a, quote, criminal organization. The charges appear to be a response to Greenwald's reports on Operation Car Watch, which revealed, as reported by The Intercept, serious ethical violations and legally prohibited collaboration between the judge and prosecutors who last year convicted and imprisoned former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on corruption charges, a conviction that resulted in Lula being barred from the 2018 presidential election. Now, a while back, I had heard about Operation Car Wash, which is called Lava Jato, is the name, and they masqueraded as an organization that was punishing corruption. They were exposing corruption, and these were some lawyers seeking the truth. They didn't have any political agenda. They were just lawyers seeking truth, and they were cracking down on financial corruption in Brazil. That sounds pretty cool, right? Sounds like it's too good to be true. Well, turns out it was. Turns out it was too good to be true. And what The Intercept revealed is that Lava Jato isn't what a lot of people thought they were. In fact, they were trying to, they had a political motive, and they were trying to get the right wing in power and oust the left wing. And they had some success in doing that. Lula wasn't able to participate in the presidential election. So they weren't who they said they were, basically. And yeah, that's so that's what The Intercept exposed. And of course, anything positive I've ever said about Lava Jato, I retract fully and wholeheartedly. They weren't who I initially thought they were. So that's what this refers to. The Intercept did a deep dive into this and said, oh, this isn't just a bunch of lawyers seeking justice and truth. This is kind of a right-wing agenda. They're heavily involved, and they're not really doing this ethically or properly at all. It turns out they're pulling the wool over people's eyes. All right, so that's what this refers to. The former Guardian columnist who now writes for The Intercept was famously the man who NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden initially contacted. Journalists and Brazilian public figures condemned authorities for the charges. Brazilian prosecutor's office indicates journalist Glenn Greenwald for connection with hackers who broke into authorities' cell phones. This is how, this is a tweet from Maya Alberti. This is how Brazil anti-corruption government deals with corruption, jails the journalists who discovered it instead of the offenders. That's powerful. Jails the journalists who uncovered it instead of the offenders. Now, here's some more of the response that we've seen so far. And this is from The Intercept itself. The Intercept has summarized some of the response that we're seeing. Let's go to that now. And then we're also going to go to see what Glenn said directly. and what others have said directly. Lawmakers speak out in support of Glenn Greenwald and press freedom. On Tuesday, Brazilian prosecutors filed a complaint. All right, so we covered that. Here's what happened. The Intercept and Greenwald denounced the complaint today, as did a number of members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, citing concerns over press freedom. Representative Ro Khanna of California said in a tweet, prosecuting reporters for doing their work will have a chilling effect on journalism across the world, adding that he's crafting legislation to protect journalists from being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, a 1917 anti-spying law that has been used recently against alleged journalistic sources and to indict Julian Assange. Our team's goal is to amend the Espionage Act so that it cannot be used to prosecute journalists that simply publish information that's provided to them, his office added in an emailed statement. The strength of our country and democracy is its free and open press that we must protect. We hope to introduce the bill in the next 3 months and make it bipartisan, but we're taking our time and working with experts at the ACLU, Columbia's Columbia's Knight First Amendment Institute, and Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. No journalist, now Ron Wyden of Workin said this, no journalist should face prosecution for reporting critical facts about the government or politicians. Sherrod Brown of Ohio said this, it's troubling that McConnell wants to keep you guys out of the hallways too, and he was referring to the crackdown on Capitol Hill press corps for the impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump, which continued today. It's all the same kind of view of the world. All right, that seems kind of like the weaker take of the three. You're not really looking at the big issue. You're just applying it to the impeachment trial. But still, you know, a nice sentiment in theory. When asked if it was concerning, Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma replied, always. I've not been able to follow up with the final details on that, but yes, we're always trying to pay attention to that. When asked about the criminal complaint, Senator Brian Schatz, a Democrat of Hawaii, said he hadn't seen the news and didn't know enough to comment on the issue. All right. Well, any charges relating to reporting and free press have been very critically and skeptically scrutinized, said Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat of Connecticut. Okay. So that's been some of the response here. And let's see. Here's a segment from Democracy Now! That someone close to Greenwald spoke on Democracy Now! Today, and I want to listen to this. I think it's kind of valuable, and I believe this is from today's Democracy Now! Brazilian authorities have charged Glenn Greenwald for allegedly hacking government officials. Here, let's pause it. Online chats following the Intercept investigation exposing high-level government corruption. Greenwald's colleague, Andrew D. Fish, says the situation is very troubling. All right, let's see what he has to say.
It's serious because this is the public ministry. This is not a joke that's happening here. The complaint is that Glenn allegedly participated in a criminal hack of telephones of senior officials in the Brazilian government and in the public ministry. That's obviously not true. He acted as a journalist. The alleged hack happened before anyone at the Intercept had any knowledge of what was happening. We had a source that came to us, an anonymous source, and presented us with very important information. And our team at the Intercept Brazil, which is 20-odd Brazilian journalists, along with Glenn and myself, have spent 8 months working on 95 original stories that have revealed very serious wrongdoing and abuses by then Judge Sergio Moro, who's now the Justice Minister, and the team of prosecutors that ran the Operation Car Wash anti-corruption investigation. And it's very ironic that we spent all of our these last 8 months reporting on and exposing that the public ministry was willing to bend the rules to go against the standards that they needed to follow their own political purposes and make prosecutions based on lack of evidence or faulty evidence or distorting the evidence. And in response to that, what they've done is made a criminal complaint against Glenn based on the distortion of the evidence to further their own personal and political interests. So it's very troubling, but the general response in Brazilian society has overwhelmingly been to condemn this action by the prosecutor. There's been an injunction by one of the Supreme Court ministers against any investigation into Glenn, and they claim that they didn't investigate, but they're still filing this complaint. And so when he comes back when this minister comes back from vacation It's very likely that he signaled that he might try to challenge it or bring this down. But now it's up to a judge in Brasilia to decide whether or not he's going to accept the charges or not, in which case Glenn would become officially a defendant in this case. Well, this is
all right. So that's what's going on there. And here's another person who has spoken out in support of Glenn Greenwald. I want to show this. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Bernie Sanders had this to say: the free press is never more important when it exposes wrongdoing by the powerful. That is why President Bolsonaro is threatening Glenn Greenwald for the crime, in quotes, of doing journalism. I call on Brazil to end its authoritarian attack on press freedom and the rule of law. Right on. Now, Glenn Greenwald says this: thanks as well to New York Times for this vehement denunciation of the Bolsonaro government and the stirring defense of a free press. I appreciate the New York Times emphasis that this is pure retaliation for the journalistic exposés published in 2019 by me and my Intercept colleagues. All right. So there you have it. Now, the reason I bring all this up, you see this report that the support that Glenn Greenwald is getting. Support from a lot of the communities here in the United States, from politicians on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, from Bernie Sanders, from Ro Khanna. And this is a good thing. This is a very, very good thing. So please don't get the wrong impression and think that I'm not really happy about this. Of course I am. And I'm a big fan of Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald has exposed corruption all around the world, in the United States, in Brazil, all around the world. He has done essential work to uncovering information and news and corruption that we may not have known about otherwise. Of course, he is legendary in that field and continues to be. But one thing I can't help but notice, and I know a lot of people have noticed this too, is that in typical United States fashion, we're very good at recognizing assaults on press freedom in other parts of the world. But when we're doing it, then we might not notice it as much. And the parallel I'm drawing here is that I hope all of these, all of these people singing the choruses of this assault on press freedom, which it certainly is, will also take it a step further and recognize the need to defend Julian Assange as well. And I'm not the first person to draw this parallel. Caitlin Johnstone wrote a piece likening what Julian Assange is going through to what Glenn Greenwald is going through now. Both are total assaults on press freedom. But, you can't help but notice in our political sphere, there's a little bit of selective outrage going on here when it's another country doing it versus when we're doing it. And I really hope that some people make those connections, people in power make those connections, and we start to see a change in the conversation around Julian Assange. The only 2020 contender, to my knowledge, that has addressed Julian Assange directly is Tulsi Gabbard, and she's spoken in favor of Julian Assange, which is good. Bernie Sanders has spoken out about the Espionage Act. He says that no journalist or publisher should ever be punished in regards to the Espionage Act, and he wants to change it. Ro Khanna has spoken about that as well. They're working on changing it, and who can be prosecuted under it. That's good. That's really good. And I hope that Bernie eventually takes it a step further and addresses Julian Assange. I really hope he does that. And we'll see. But him coming out against the Espionage Act, that's very good. That's a very big deal. Tulsi Gabbard speaking in favor of Assange, that's very good. That's a very big deal. There's a lot of people running for office in 2020, a lot of people running for who completely get that wrong, completely get it wrong on Julian Assange. And I'd be curious what they'll say about Glenn Greenwald, if anything. So, I guess time will tell. We will see. But here is another person who made that connection. I mentioned that Caitlin Johnstone made that connection. Well, here is someone else who did, Jill Stein. So let's go to Jill Stein's Twitter. And now we're also going to hear from Glenn directly as well. Here's what Jill Stein tweeted. And then I want to watch this from Glenn Greenwald. This is Glenn addressing it himself, which is what I was waiting for. So, we're going to watch this. But here's what Dr. Jill Stein tweeted. Time for all of us to set aside political differences and defend Glenn Greenwald from the fascist Bolsonaro regime. The persecution of Julian Assange set the precedent for this assault on press freedom, emboldening elite criminals to target journalists who expose their corruption. Well put. And here's what Glenn himself had to say. Oh, let me make sure the volume's up. Boom.
Hi, this is Glenn Greenwald with The Intercept.
He's in a really cool looking place. It's a really pretty place right there. I think that's in Brazil. All right, anyway. It's Glenn Greenwald with The Intercept.
And by now, you've probably heard the news that there has been a criminal charge brought against me by the Bolsonaro government in retaliation for the series of journalistic exposés we've been publishing and reporting since last June, showing high-level corruption in the Bolsonaro government, in particular by his Minister of Justice and Public Security, Sergio Moro. A few facts about this criminal charge. First is that, as you probably know, the Bolsonaro government, President Bolsonaro, multiple members of his government simply don't believe in a free press. They don't believe in press freedom. They don't even believe in democracy. They've repeatedly and explicitly praised the military dictatorship that ruled the country until 1985 as a superior form of government, and this is all about ushering in that level of repression. Secondly, the prosecutor who brought the charges just a couple of months ago unsuccessfully tried to bring similar charges against the head of the Brazilian Bar Association, who criticized Minister Sergio Moro, and he tried to claim that that criticism constituted a crime in Brazil, and it was rejected by the courts. He's obviously somebody abusing his prosecutorial power to punish the political enemies of the Bolsonaro government. Third, the federal police conducted a comprehensive investigation of our reporting, of our sources, and concluded in a report published just a couple of months ago that everything shows that I never committed any crime. Much to the contrary, I always exercised what they called the highest level of professionalism, caution, and responsibility in ensuring that I was doing my work as a journalist and never got anywhere near a crime. We're going to defend a free press like we always have. We're not going to be intimidated by the Bolsonaro government. I'm continuing right this very minute to work on our next series of stories. This is an attack on Brazilian democracy.
And there you go. This is an attack on Brazilian democracy. I believe Glenn Greenwald. I believe Glenn Greenwald.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and